This talk is about the future of our port. So a lot of you are probably wondering why this first slide says fight the freight zone. Gulf County joined something called a freight logistics zone back in 2017 with 3 other counties. And the cornerstone or anchor of this freight zone was to reopen a cargo port at Port St. Joe, reestablish the Apalachicola Northern Railroad. The goal of the zone is to promote industrial development in the rural counties that are a part of it. So Senator Simon and Representative Schoaf have announced they will introduce a bill this legislative session, which starts in January. They just announced it in August, to totally eliminate our port authority and replace it with one that Gulf County only has 1 vote in. And the other counties that are part of this freight zone, Gaston, Franklin, Liberty, each have a vote, plus the governor will be appointing a state commissioner as well. So we will have 1 vote in 5. Gulf County will bear all the risk of this with the reopening of our port, environmental risk, economic risk, public health risk. I'll be showing that later. And the other counties just get the rewards of it. We need all hands on deck, our city, county, and our port authority to unite against what is in essence a takeover of our port. This is a map of the Gulf to Gadsden Freight Logistics Zone. You can see we've got Gulf County, Franklin County, Liberty, and Gadsden. And these little blue areas are the areas that each county was allowed to pick for promotion and marketing, receive priority and state funding. So Gadsden obviously picked ones along, but they already have a freight logistics zone that stretches from Jacksonville to Pensacola with the railroad and I-10. So they picked distribution centers and whatnot there. Liberty County has a railroad spur that goes down to Hosford to their paper mill there. And they picked a couple areas north of that that were old industrial sites, and now they are being considered for purchase to have an industrial park there. Franklin County chose around the Apalachicola Railroad, and you can see Gulf County chose several spots. The largest is right here, which is the 3,300 acres that our county commission just switched from agricultural to industrial lands. It's owned by St. Joe Company, and it's where the airport is going to be going. Well, Gulf County will own the airport. St. Joe Company will run it. And we just received some state funds to start the access road into that. How that's really part of the freight zone, I haven't figured out, because even though they're talking cargo and industrial airport, we've heard those terms. That runway is just not long enough for major cargo planes. So I don't really know what that airport's all about. And we're going to talk about that at another meeting, I suppose. So here is the railroads that run around the area. The orange lines are the major routes, and the yellow lines are the spur railroads. Port St. Joe's always been geographically isolated. We're 70, 80 miles from I-10. And we certainly can't transfer cargo by truck along Highway 98. So the Apalachicola Northern Railroad returning to us would be essential for a port. And that's where it used to run, the white dotted line. It hasn't run there for about 15 years, and the bridges over the Apalachicola River are completely unusable. They would have to be rebuilt. But even if they are rebuilt by this new freight zone port authority, if you want to call it that, Panama City is still closer to all the major hubs by railroad, and actually by road as well. They're closer to Pensacola, Dothan, Montgomery, Valdosta, Waycross, and we're slightly closer to Jacksonville, but not really any more direct than they are. So we wouldn't really be competitive with Port Panama City is what this is saying, even if we do have a cargo port here. So the new shipping channel would impact 450 acres of the bay. It would remove 5.6 million cubic yards of bottom sediment and require maintenance dredging on average every 3 years. And this is where the current channel is and where it would be redredged. And one of the things we're talking about, maintenance dredging, the Army Corps only has money to maintain ports that have an excess of 1 million tons of cargo a year. Low volume ports usually have to find their own money to do maintenance dredging. So we would have to find the money for this. And we're wondering if this becomes a cargo port, would these other counties that are part of this freight logistics zone, Liberty, Gadsden, Franklin, and Tallahassee, whose plan this is, chip in for the dredging every few years. So one of the things we're concerned about with a cargo port is air pollution to begin with. We're going to have locomotives back. Like I said, we would have to have the train back to have a port at all. Commercial trucks, refineries, or other port associated industry, we have no idea what would come. So it's unpredictable as far as air pollution. We know ships produce nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, volatile organics, soot, and other particulates. And the Sagan Railroad that's coming back, the EPA and Justice Department sued them just in 2023 for violations of the Clean Air Act from their older diesel engines. We also have ship-created water pollution. This is one of the more concerning things for me, at least. There are 26 sources of vessel-created water pollution regulated by the EPA for every commercial ship. You got the bilge water, it contains oil and other contaminants, wash and cooling water for equipment. The sewage and gray water contain bacteria. Now, raw sewage, of course, can't be dumped in our bay. It has to be dumped at least 9 miles from the coast of Florida. But treated sewage, gray water from showers, mess halls, laundries, things like that, still have pathogens, nitrogen, phosphorus, and some chemicals, depending on the system that they have. We can't really register St. Joe Bay as a no discharge zone for this kind of waste unless we provide pump out facilities at the port. So that would be another investment we would have to make. And then finally, the emission scrubbers, they discharge sulfuric acid, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, and heavy metals. These scrubbers were introduced when international law required ships to cut down on their air pollution. But instead of going to cleaner fuels, most of them installed these little devices where basically the polluted air is run through water filters and then dumped into the ocean. So we trade air pollution for water pollution with those. Then we have the ballast water that we would have to contend with, bringing invasive species. Basically, there's a little cartoon, ships somewhere in some port somewhere in the world. Number one, when they're empty of cargo, they have to load in ballast water to maintain their trim while they're sailing. And along with the ballast water come those little green thingies, which are organisms. And they sail and they come to Port St. Joe and they will have to discharge this ballast water and all the little organisms to load up on the cargo. So that would also be something we'd have to contend with. Froze there for a minute, sorry. We have 15 ports in Florida. 11 of them are cargo ports. They are in orange. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with this. The black ring ones are the cruise ports, and the blue ones are called other non-cargo ports. Port Key West is, as you can see, it's cruise only. And one interesting thing that we need to take heed of with that port is a couple of years ago, they had a public referendum to limit the size of the cruise ships because they were basically being inundated by tourists. And they also wanted to ban those with poor environmental records because they thought they were hurting the coral reefs. And the state immediately wrote a law saying the public cannot interfere with maritime commerce. Once a port is active, the public is not allowed to have control of it. Port Citrus is run by the county commission. They have a real shallow port, and they did feasibility study that basically told them they didn't want to ruin their tourism with the manatees and whatnot just to have some barge traffic. So they are pretty much non-functional. And then we have Port St. Pete. You can see it's right near two cargo ports, just like we're right near the cargo port at Port Panama City. But they chose not to be either cargo or cruise ship. So what did they decide to do instead? Well, on the upper right is a picture of Port Manatee, which is one of those ports that was near them, and they didn't really like the looks of that. And on the lower right is Port Tampa Container Terminal, and they didn't really like that. So they chose instead building and repair of mega yachts as their use of their port, and they are pictured there on the left. And they have their port pretty integrated with their town. It's their downtown, their arts district, and their innovation district. So it seems like that our Port Authority and our Board of County Commissioners are heading along the same lines as Port St. Pete. They are working for commercial vessel repair rather than a cargo operation right now. They've got a $75 million project to provide a floating dry dock to expand Eastern Shipbuilding's maintenance opportunities. That 75 million, part of that is going to come from the Deepwater Horizon oil spill settlement money run by Triumph Gulf Coast. The other half will come from county issued bonds to be paid back by the lease payments from Eastern. A lot of people are going, what in the heck is a floating dry dock? That seems to be a major question around town. And basically, it's a giant floating mobile ship garage. They pull the thing out by tugboats out into the Gulf, where they can lower it, float a ship on, and tug it back in, raise it back up and tug it back in. And then they can work on it to do repairs as if it was on dry land. I called Port Tampa, which is the closest dry dock facility to us, and they told me that the waiting time for their dry dock for commercial vessels was a year. So even if Eastern loses shipbuilding contracts, floating dry dock would help retain jobs, which is what the county has been saying. So we decided to just kind of compare cargo port versus a floating dry dock, what each one of those mean. We got about 300 ships a year that come into Port Panama City versus about 12 ships we're figuring for the floating dry dock. You've seen how long it takes to repair any ships out there. They stay quite a few months. 450 acres of the bay impacted by dredging, 7 acres for the floating dry dock, 5.6 million cubic yards of sediment removed with a cargo port, 200,000 cubic yards for a dry dock. We've got the air pollution. I've already talked about that with ships, trucks, trains, plants of various kinds. Air pollution for the dry dock is low. We did look at the permits, and xylene was the largest amount of hazardous air pollutant listed. But I know from working in science that xylene actually evaporates very quickly. I don't see it personally being a problem for the general public at all. Also, particulate matter from the blasting work to clean the ship for repainting. But I checked on that, and they use a chemically inert, environmentally safe abrasive. We've got noise pollution with a cargo port, with the trains and the trucks and the cargo handling. There's almost no noise pollution on the dry dock side. Impact on tourism would be higher with a cargo port. There might be impact on tourism with floating dry dock. It would stick out 450 feet into the bay. They tend to rust and get a little ugly looking, but whether it would impact tourism, we don't know. Water pollution, I've already gone over for the cargo port. Now, what kind of water pollution risk do we have for a dry dock? International law in 2023 required environmentally safer paints and less toxic biocides. Biocides are what they kind of put on the ship to keep the barnacles and stuff from growing. So it is less of a problem, water pollution, than it was in the past. Of course, you're still working on propellers and various equipment just a few feet above the water, so it's not completely safe. And then we've got safety concerns, derailments, fire and explosions on a cargo port side. And I actually talked with an old railroad worker, and he said, yes, they had derailments in the past in Gulf County. They had fires started by the train in Gulf County in the past. Luckily, the derailments were just coal and wood, and you know, fires didn't burn down any houses that we know of, but it could happen. And with cargo instead of just coal and wood, we could be in for some trouble with that. Our fire department is all volunteer, and they are not trained. They don't have equipment for any sort of industrial firefighting. Safety concerns for the floating dry dock. I personally was trying to think of one, and I couldn't think of any that would be a safety concern. So we have been told that a floating dry dock means no dredging of the shipping channel, since they took that little, you know, ship garage out there to load the ships in. No cargo port or associated industry, only 10 or 12 ships a year instead of 300. So we got less environmental risk from each ship. No big trucks on the 2-lane highways, and no return to the railroad. So we thought, that sounds pretty good, but we had to ask ourselves, was all this that we've been told true? So when we were reading all the permit applications, we have read every document we can find on this, on the floating dry dock, and all the environmental assessments and everything, we found a couple statements that were concerning to us. The project, referring to the dry dock, will reestablish the Port of Port St. Joe as a deep water port and support the Port Authority's mission statement. And also the proposed dredge area for the dry dock was minimized to assist the Port Authority to achieve its mission. So that made us ask ourselves, what exactly is the Port Authority's mission? So here's from the Port Master Plan of 2021. Their mission is basically fostering the growth of domestic and foreign commerce. It's underlined in red there. In short, a cargo port. But despite this mission statement, the Port Authority has been working closely, as I mentioned, with the county on the ship repair floating dry dock idea. In fact, they're co-applicants with the county on the grant application for the dry dock. At the same time, chairman of the Port Authority is on record as stating this freight logistics zone plan by our legislators is a good thing if it helps to get the port open. So we're kind of confused about where the Port Authority stands, or at least where the chairman stands. So we were asking, does a ship repair facility actually preclude a cargo port, or is it a prelude to a cargo port? So you can see that purple line is where Eastern Shipbuilding is. This map is actually from the master plan, the port master plan. That purple line is the existing bulkhead. The red shows Eastern Shipbuilding. That is where the dry dock would go, so it would take up a little more of the room. So we're thinking, okay, that does take up most of the existing bulkhead, but the port master plan also includes a dredge and fill area to increase the port's usable bulkhead area by 3,600 feet. And this was also mentioned not just in the master plan, but in the recent, just a couple of weeks ago, joint meeting between the Board of County Commissioners and the Port Authority. So that is still a consideration. And the land behind that green line is all industrial. It's zoned industrial only. It is so contaminated from the paper mill that's all they can put on there is industry. You see the yellow lines are where the Apalachicola Northern Railroad comes into town. And it completely encircles North Port St. Joe, and it comes near a lot of other communities that would be impacted by the noise and air pollution from the railroad's return. Sorry about that. So we know for either a floating dry dock or a cargo port, we have to dredge through the worst of the paper mill toxins in the bay. It should be the choice of the local citizens whether to take this risk with our economy, our environment, and public health, not the outsiders. We don't want people up in Liberty County deciding whether or not we should take the risk to open the port. This is a historic photo of the port. The paper mill produced 25 to 30 million gallons of wastewater per day. It was operating for 60 years. And for over half that time, they discharged waste from their surface impoundment, which is here, through 2 ditches into the bay. After that time, it went to a wastewater treatment plant, but they were not required to test for a lot of the industrial toxins that we're worried about today. The dry dock would be located about there. I'm guessing that's about where it goes. It's kind of hard to use an old historic photo to figure that out. And you can see it's right where that one ditch comes down, where a lot of the toxins were discharged. So the dredging for the floating dry dock would be in that little L-shaped area. The shipping channel would also require to be dredged through there, plus some more, of course. And right there, that little pinkish X is where the highest levels of a contaminant called dioxin have been found to date. And that is the most concerning of the toxins to us. And I'm going to show you why on the next slide. Dioxins are basically Agent Orange. They're pretty much same thing. And Agent Orange is known to create neuropathies, Parkinson's, various systemic problems, hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, ton of cancers, lymphomas, leukemias, soft tissue cancers. And adults exposed, they can have spina bifida in their children. But a lot of people say, well, the paper mill's been closed for 25 years. Surely all those dioxins are gone. First of all, dioxins are insoluble. They adhere to sediments, bottom sediments, and they have an average half-life of 100 years in the environment. That means that if you have 100 nanograms, after 100 years, you still got 50 nanograms. After 200 years, you still got 25 nanograms. It does not degrade very fast. And factors that increase this are low sunlight, low temperature, and lack of oxygen, all which are found in marine sediments. U.S. Fish and Wildlife estimated that 20,000 acres of the bay floor were contaminated with dioxins. So yeah, it's still there. There's no question. Here are pictures of what the core samples, when they test for these various contaminants, they core down so that they get into the older sediments. And this is, and they would core down, say 10 feet if the dredging was going to be 10 feet in that area, or 6 feet or 5 feet. It changes depending on where you are in the shipping channel. So out of these cores, there were 12 that were taken in the port area itself. And the levels were high enough in half of these that if the sample had been taken on land, the FDP wouldn't let you put a house there. It was above their residential standards. And 3/4 of them, 9 of 12, exceeded NOAA's safety level for the marine environment. On top of that, none of the 12 samples, and this is an important point here, reached the full dredging depth that they were supposed to reach. Some were truncated at 40 to 50% down. The average were 70 to 75% down of what they were supposed to reach. And we have no idea how far down the dioxin layers are. So This pretty much makes the current testing that we have useless. And I'm going to show you a hypothetical slide here. Please just try to follow me as I explain it on why I can say these testing is useless. So our question is, these are on the left is what we call a core sample that was supposed to go down to 10 feet. And you can see that after about 4 feet, we start hitting the toxins where you see 10 nanograms, you know. And then on that left core, the amount decreases over time as you get deeper and deeper. You might be getting back to where there was not even a paper mill existed, so you had clean sediments. On the right, we have a hypothetical core sample where we are increasing in sediments as we go back in time, getting deeper, back from the 40s, 50s, 60s, when the paper mill was discharging a lot of toxins because nobody really knew about dioxin, and there was no FDEP and no EPA back then. But remember that I said that 70% was the typical core sample was truncated, cut off at 70%. So if we drew a line at 7 here, you can see if we sent the left core sample to the lab, it would see 10, 20, 30, 40 nanograms. If we sent the one on the right to the lab, it would see 40 nanograms. It wouldn't see anything below that 7-foot mark. So the lab is reporting the same thing, and you can tell there are 2 totally different amounts of toxins in that sample. So what this means at the end is that on the left, even though the samples are truncated, they dredge all the way down to 10 feet, they're getting down to clean sediment. We get rid of all the toxins. It's an environmental plus, everything's cool. On the right, in the worst case scenario, we actually dredge down to where we have significant contamination that will be left exposed in the environment. So that's why we say that the truncated samples don't really tell us anything, because we have no idea what is going to be left exposed after dredging. And this is what our group has been harping on since the beginning, is we have a solution to this. We've run it by the head of the FDP, the head scientist, and a lot of other scientists, and it's pretty simple, straightforward. You collect samples to the full dredging depth, sample A, and then you extend the core 2 feet deeper, sample B, and just cut that off and send it to the lab separately. If it's low, we know we have that best case scenario. We can dredge for a dry dock. If it's high, we might have to leave the bay alone, or we could risk tourism, fisheries, or public health. So that's the solution. We've got to retest. Unfortunately, retesting would cost between $80,000 and $100,000, which obviously our group doesn't have. And the FDP is not requiring retesting because, and I'm going to give a quote here, they are not mandated to find out what will be left exposed to the environment. In fact, the FDP is not required, it's not mandated, and is not allowed to find out what will be left exposed. And they can't tell us what agency is supposed to monitor that. In fact, we asked FDP several questions, and we told them it was going to be for this presentation. And they answered the questions for us. And the first was, do you have any data on how far down the toxins are at Port St. Joe? And they said, no, they have no data on that. We asked if they required the samples to reach full dredging depth. They said, no, they didn't require that. We asked again to make sure that we had heard right. Are they allowed to determine how much dioxin will be left exposed after dredging? They said, no, they are not allowed to do that. They are only concerned with what will be managed in a spoil site, not what will be left in the environment. And we also told them of an error in the current Port St. Joe channel dredging permit. We found that the dioxins were actually underreported by 1,000-fold due to a math error. And they said they will not rescind the permit that this is based off of. We're still working on them with this, but basically, since they thought they had 1,000-fold less, they didn't require a lot of lining and capping of the spoil disposal site that they should have required. So we are concerned about using that disposal site for channel dredging for a port when it's not lined or capped like it should have been. And they have no list of required safe dredging practices, even though they know the contamination is there. So we've got a state that's pushing us to dredge a shipping channel, 450 acres, yet the state's own DEP will not protect us or the bay. Now for the dry dock, it's our BOCC that wants to dredge that 7 acres. And for, of course, if the entire port comes in, the Port Authority will be dredging. At least it's our Port Authority for now. Might be a multi-county Port Authority in the future. It's not the Army Corps coming in saying we got to dredge. It's not St. Joe Company. It's not Eastern Shipbuilding. This is us. This is local. So what our group wants is safety first. We want retesting of the levels of dioxin that will be left exposed after dredging. That's that A and B little slide I showed you where you go down the extra 2 feet below the dredging depth and test that separately so you know what's going to be left exposed. We would also like to make sure that the safest equipment and practices for toxin containing sediment dredging be used, not the lowest bidder. And we want to contain the contaminated spoils safely in a lined and capped disposal site like the FTBP should require. And why this is particularly concerning is that the FDP has, or not the FDP, I'm sorry, the county has withdrawn their current permit application with the FDP to put their spoils from the floating dry dock into this lined and capped disposal site and said, oh, well, we're just gonna use that old permit that's already in effect. And that's the permit that is 1,000-fold off and does not require lining and capping. So we have a little problem with that. And, you know, we keep hearing from the county that this is just 7 acres. It's no big deal. It's only a teeny weeny tiny piece of the port. But that 7 acres just happens to be right by the paper mill. It's the most contaminated area of the bay. And we have to deal with what we have and not what we wish we had. Now, the second thing we'd like to see is no risk without reward. Commissioner Pridgeon came up with the idea to establish a maritime academy to prepare Gulf County residents for shipyard employment, teaching, you know, pipe fitting, electrician, maritime electricians, welding, you know, whatever they need, and to reach an apprenticeship agreement with Eastern Shipbuilding. This was an idea that we really loved. Unfortunately, Triumph Gulf Coast is requiring us to remove it from the grant for the dry dock, saying it's a separate grant. So we need the county to be working on a way to get another grant for this idea. Otherwise, we're just going to have a floating dry dock that's going to benefit everybody but Gulf County citizens because we don't have a trained workforce for it. So the Gulf County citizens was ready to support a floating dry dock. We actually had a letter written of support we were going to send to Triumph Gulf Coast. But then we began being more and more concerned with the things that I have listed above, the fact that there's, you know, right now they're still hoping to get a maritime academy, but not a lot of work toward it. we have been told they're probably not going to retest. A couple of commissioners are hoping to. And then this thing where the county decided to try to contain the spoils in a less safe area. We just began to get too concerned with what was going on. So we decided not to send our letter of support, but we'd like to. Where our leaders stand right now, the city actually did just rescind their letter of support for the grant to construct a floating dry dock. They did include in that letter a phrase "at this time," and they indicated at their meeting when they voted on this that they wanted the county and the Port Authority to answer pretty much the same questions we were asking on the previous slide. Will it be done safely? Will you retest? Will you protect our tourism, quality of life? And will it employ city residents or provide some benefit to the city? That's where they kind of stand. The county has a solid majority in favor of a floating dry dock ship repair facility as opposed to a commercial port. The Port Authority definitely is in favor of the floating dry dock. They're on the grant, but we're unsure if they also want a commercial port because of what the chairman of that board said several times, that he'd like to see a commercial port too. But whatever the differences is, we have got to get our county, our Port Authority, our city, our citizens united to tell Tallahassee that this got to be our decision. This port is central to Gulf County. It's us, and we have to make the decision, not somebody up in Gadsden County or Gadsden Liberty and some state appointed person from Bay County outvoting Gulf County on what's going to happen there. That just is not right. So the first thing you can do is stay informed. Join Gulf County Citizens. Don't cost anything to join. We send out newsletters whenever there's something going on like this to let people know. We have a Facebook page as well. We need people right now to contact Jason Schoaf and Corey Simon and let them know that Gulf County alone should decide the fate of our port and our future. Here's their phone numbers. You can find them on the web, obviously. Please be respectful when you do this. These gentlemen have done a lot of good for Gulf County with the breakwaters over on the peninsula. With our group worked with the Kill the Drill with Jason Schoaf for the past year, trying to stop oil drilling in the Apalachicola River Basin. And he got that legislation through. So they have been very good. I don't know if they think this is just the best thing for Gulf County or whether they're looking at the other counties and saying, well, it's the best for them. But it should be our decision, and you need to tell them that. And finally, we are going to be asking for this unification. We're going to be asking the city, the county, and the Port Authority on their next meetings, October 21st, October 28th, November 12th, to send a letter, to vote, to send an official letter to Schoaf and Simon saying, we don't want this, Gulf to Gadsden freight logistics zone controlling our port. We want control of the port. And so if you can't attend these meetings and speak, at least write your commissioners and tell them how you want them to vote. We need citizens that are informed, involved, and proactive at this point. And that is the end. Any questions?
Yeah, Deb, there's a couple in the chat. I'm just going to ask straight out. There's a couple of statements that I'll also share. And this is from earlier on, and Chris did answer this, but I'm going to go ahead and ask in case you have anything to add. When you say it is Tallahassee plan, is it the city of Tallahassee, or are you referring to state legislation?
I'm sorry, I'm referring to the state. yeah, state legislation.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, next question. So they can dump the treated sewage and gray water into the port?
From what I
Port.
understand, I need to probably research this closer. But from what I understand, that if you don't have any sort of pump out facility, then you can dump it closer, to shore than we can't designate ourselves as a no dumping area without something that they can use to pump it out. That's what I understand right now, but I do need to research that law a little closer.
Okay.
Raw sewage, no, it's got to be 9 miles out.
Okay. Let's see. Jeez. Is there any part of this plan that does any good for us whatsoever? I'm trying to see both sides of this equation, but I'm coming up with crickets.
Well, I mean, it's jobs. I mean, whether we're talking a cargo port or a ship repair facility, it's jobs. The ship repair facility, we would need a trained workforce, and that's where Commissioner Pridgeon's idea of starting a maritime academy, and the Port Authority has offered to let that be built on the land that they own right across from the port. So that it could be a benefit. It could be a long-term benefit if we get, our kids into training to go to work here in our, port facility for, and those are pretty high paying jobs when you're talking maritime repair and outfitting. Cargo port, again, you're going to have some jobs. I don't know what involves driving forklifts or, cranes or whatever. But to me, the risk of a cargo port, which I've hopefully outlined, may not be worth those kind of jobs. So, whether it helps us or not, jobs is the reason that they're pushing it.
Okay, another comment question from Jack. I'm totally against this plan. The first few slides showed we wouldn't be competitive. So why spend money on something that is not for the common good? What is wrong with our tourism economy as a long-term vision for us? It's already hard enough to keep up with the incoming stress on our roads and other infrastructure.
Right, but I agreed with that completely. That's why I showed the first few slides that we would not be competitive as a cargo port. I don't believe at all with Panama City already having the infrastructure, the railroads, the roads, the workforce. Everything is already there. We would not be competitive for a cargo port. Now, with the floating dry dock and a ship repair facility, the closest facility is Port Tampa. And then there's one at Mobile. And so that's why our commissioners are talking about we could have a niche industry basically in ship repair. And they're hoping that just having the ship repair facility here would maybe bring manufacturing jobs to manufacture parts for ships and whatnot. But that's a hope. That's not a promise. But yeah, as far as what a cargo port would do for us at Port St. Joe, all I see is risk and not a lot of reward.
All right, thank you. So from Kathy, does Eastern really bring local jobs or traffic from commuters from Panama City?
That is something I have not personally researched. We get information from the Economic Development Coalition head, Jim McKnight, who said that there are people employed with Eastern right now. The numbers kind of have been fluctuating, so I really don't know how many, and I don't have the authority as a Gulf County citizen, to go to Eastern and say, how many people are you employing from Gulf County? So I don't know that answer.
I wonder if the Chamber of Commerce would know. But another question from Kathy is, where does the extracted sediment get deposited?
I'm sorry, I'm writing down, talk to the Chamber of Commerce. So there's the main place that they would be depositing the sediments is an area behind Highland View, right along the industrial canal. That is the area. And it's supposed to be lined and capped for the dry dock spoil disposal. But like I said, the county is kind of trying to get around that part of the permit. And that's one of the things we're unhappy with. Yeah, that's where it would go. And I think we're going to be able to fight FDP to not let them get around that permit, because they've already said that it, with the amount of toxins that, have been reported, it should be in a lined and cap facility. They've said that unequivocally.
Okay, from Tracy, if we were to get a trained workforce, do we have any guarantee that local people will be hired rather than bringing in trained outsiders with years of previous experience?
I am hoping, I believe Commissioner Pridgeon has enough expertise in education. He comes from an education type background, that he would insist that there be an apprenticeship program in the deal for the dry dock. That before we accepted the grant money, that Eastern would have to sign on with an apprenticeship program. That's his view, his dream. So I'm hoping that's what would happen. But right now, no, that hasn't been worked out.
Okay, thank you. From Shannon, he had public citizen forced to sue, unfortunately, over the LNG. Who to trust?
I'm not sure that's a question. I don't.
Okay. Well, let's go on and maybe we can get back to that. But okay, from Sherry, would the Board of County Commission members benefit financially with outside deals or contracts?
I have absolutely no information on that.
That is certainly something that would be of interest to find out. But moving on to David's question, are the citizens specifically opposed to the bill that would expand the board of the Port Authority to nearby counties? Could Triumph monies for the dry dock be used for dredging? What would fund it?
Okay, the second question first. Yes, the grant for the dry dock includes funding for the dredging and disposal site. And what was the other part of the question? Oh, the expansion.
Expansion, yeah.
It's not an expansion of the Port Authority. That's what bothers us. It would be a brand new reorganized Port Authority with 5 members, only one of which would come from Gulf County. So we would have a 20% vote in our own Port Authority, and the other votes would all come from Gadsden, Liberty, Franklin, and somewhere else, wherever the governor decides. I would guess Bay County, but I don't know what he's thinking. But no, it's not an expansion of our Port Authority. That's what's so concerning.
Okay, from Lynn, is this connected with Franklin County's economic development plan supported by local and state elected officials? We are developing our airport to attract businesses. I'm not sure if Franklin County is considering rail use. So basically, is this connected with Franklin County's economic development plan?
I don't know Franklin County's economic development plan. The areas that they chose to be part of the freight logistics zone are around their airport. I have no idea if Franklin County wants the railroad back or not. I mean, they're doing other things with their airport right now. They've started a A&P school for airplane mechanics. They've got their emergency facilities out there now. But whether they're wanting to get into something that would involve a railroad, I have no clue. I have enough problems keeping up with Gulf County.
All right, thanks, Deb. So Chester shared in the chat, we have a job training grant now that will help later. The CDC is working on getting locals to take the courses.
Okay.
Okay, and we've got time for about one other question if somebody wants to share it in the chat, or if you would like a follow-up to a question that was already asked. If not, hearing none, seeing no, okay. Okay, I'll drop that in the chat, Michelle. Let me see, there you go. I'm dropping the website and the link to the Facebook chat, which is, or excuse me, the Facebook, which is Gulf County Citizens.
Hey, Mary, I'd like to make a comment if you can hear me.
Yeah, just a minute. I have another question here.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Can you speak to how the SI Ferry work is positive so far?
The what work?
It says SI Ferry work is positive so far. I'm not sure what the SI Ferry is. Staten Island. Staten Island, thank you.
Oh, Staten Island.
Shannon.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the ferries that they've done, the other things they've done, a lot of the workforce has come from outside of Gulf County, but it's because we don't have a trained workforce. So I don't know that it's benefited Gulf County that much as far as the work that's being done right now.
Okay, just a couple of follow-ups. Are we getting jobs from that? What about tax revenue?
I don't know the answer to that.
All right, thank you. And John, you had a quick statement?
Yeah, well, just going back to the ferries, I think it's with the state of Washington has I think there's millions of dollars in a contract with Eastern for ferries, and I would assume that they would probably be outfitted at our facility if that were to, that would have come through. But as far as the port, I'd like to remind everybody that, if we were to go full-blown cargo port, the LNG plan or no petro would, I think, certainly reconsider coming back to Port St. Joe, because one of the last things they said before they pulled out was, we reserve the right to come back when if conditions change. And right now, the conditions are changing. And there's a lot of money now for ports in this current administration. So, that could rear its ugly head again. So just be aware of that. And as far as, we need to get our commissioners to commit to no major port here. And I would recommend, and I've done this myself, call your commissioners, let them know what you feel. If they don't hear from you, they figure everything's fine, they agree with me, you let them know. Call them, leave a message, email them. The more people do that, the better, because they will listen to a lot of people, calling or emailing.
All right, thanks, John. We have one more question and then we need to close out. Was there any negative environmental impact with repairing the ferries?
I don't know. I looked at the permits from FDEP, and there was nothing that was considered a violation in the time period that the ferries were there.
All right, thank you so much. Okay,
one
sorry.
other thing that, like John was mentioning, a lot of people are saying, well, they're never going to come up with all the money they need for this. He's correct. The president has created maritime opportunity zones throughout the United States, and there is millions of dollars worth of money available for port development but also for workforce training that we're hoping, you know, I know our county commissioners know that that money's available, and we're hoping that they're gonna jump on that while it's available. But it's also available for port development if our legislators, Schoaf and Simon, want to push port. They've got money available for that too. So, you know, that's why this is such a concerning question.
Okay.
Mayor, can I, one more,
Okay.
just one more. I want to back up John. I went over to Panama City and I spoke with the construction unit that's building a brand new bridge. My question to them was, what was the purpose of the bridge? And he said, basically because the shipbuilding do not have a way to build bigger ships and get them out. So for the next 3 years, they're going to be building another bridge that's going to go over the other bridge that they have going into timber. So they are expanding, and he's right. They are looking to bring that LNG project back to this area.
All right. Thank you for that update, which obviously is concerning, but and just as I mentioned before, you will receive a recording of the presentation today, so be on the lookout for that. Also, I'll drop the information one last time on how you can get in touch with the group via Facebook or on their website, so you can become a member, which is free. And then if you have any questions, you could reach out. Any additional questions, you can reach out to the group and they would be more than happy to follow up with that. And also finally, if you wanted to, you can save the chat if for any information that you might want to retain. So, all right. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. We appreciate your time, and we hope that you become engaged with this effort and with this group. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.